Hello, everybody, and welcome to your very first Close in 5 Accelerator session. You guys are our September cohort. We will do some introductions in a minute, but first, let me introduce myself. So, my name is Tessa Hebditch. I will be leading each of our weekly sessions over the next 6 or 7 weeks. This is technically week 0, which I realise is a very confusing numbering system, but bear with it. This is your kickoff session. So lots of homework and things to do before our session next week from this one. So my name is Tessa Hebditch. I run a company called Chickpea. We are the feminine, people-first alternative to Big Four transformation. And this accelerator is designed to help you improve your month end and move us to a 5-day close. So without further ado, let's go around the room and give a bit of an introduction. When you do your introduction, if you're comfortable to, please share your name, your role, the company you work for, and if anyone has any particular challenges they want to call out in their month-end process, now is the time to do it. So we'll go to Thank you all for entertaining that. So this session, week 0, as I said, apologies for the numbering system. This is all about mapping the current process. So we have a 3-part session today. We will be mapping the madness that is your month end. We'll be unmasking the culprits, and we'll be sharing amongst this group, amongst the peers in this group. So this session is really to help you visualize your month-end close processes, identify those inefficiencies, and set the stage for those targeted improvements. So let's start by mapping the madness. This part of the session should enable you to create a visual representation of your month-end close process. So that's highlighting the dependencies, any bottlenecks, and also any areas that are prone to delays. Waiting is a big issue in month end. So anything prone to delays or also prone to errors, because corrections and reviews are a big topic that does slow down our month end. So let's start by asking why. Why is it important to understand your current process before implementing the changes? So let's look through this list here together. So making sure that we understand those current processes is absolutely the right place to start. I know some of us do shy away from these discovery phases, but we have to absolutely understand where we are starting from. Now, the reason being is because we can actually start to target those improvements. Continuous improvement, I'm a massive fan of, massive believer in. So that really means that everything can be improved. So if you don't really understand where you are, then you might start with something that won't give you the biggest impact. And then when we start on these types of journeys, it's really important that we see some quick wins. So that is either something very quick to correct or improve, or either something which would have a big emotional impact for your team. That sets us on the right path, and that is what will build the momentum. So it makes sure those improvements are targeted, effective, but also sustainable. So not just a sticky plaster that will fix something for a short period of time until you grow a bit bigger, and then everything will come undone. So that's the first reason it's important. The second reason is again, that sticky plaster idea. It reduces that risk that the symptoms are addressed rather than the root cause. So we will look at today a bit of root cause analysis on some of those month-end issues too. It also allows you guys to make informed decisions and gain that team buy-in. So that is really giving them something tangible that they can see has improved to help them spend the time fixing other parts of your month-end process, because they understand this is going to give them time back in the long run. That also minimizes disruption to the team, and again ensures that meaningful, lasting enhancements. So process mapping, let's talk about what process mapping is. So process mapping can kind of be whatever you want it to be. It can be sticky notes on the wall. It can be something a bit more complex, maybe in a tool like Visio or Lucidchart, or it can be a PowerPoint, it can be on Excel, it can be whatever you want to do, but it's a visual tool, and that's really key. When we just have words on a page, or when we just talk about a process, sometimes it's hard to see where those inefficiencies are. So process mapping is a visual tool used to document and analyze each step within your workflow. And like I say, it makes it easier to identify those inefficiencies, those bottlenecks, and those redundancies. It starts to illustrate that sequencing, even things around timing, and that's where you'll pick out these waiting points. Waiting is a massive waste of time, is one of the biggest wastes in lean that gets overlooked, and you can start to see where those points are in the process too. You'll also look at the roles involved. A key thing we actually see quite a lot is too many cooks spoiling the broth, too many people involved in one of the steps. So that's a really key thing to pull out in your process mapping. And also those decision points. Now, some of us are control freaks. I think I've got better. But yeah, those decision points might be slowing us down. So really thinking about where those actually sit and what they are trying to achieve by having that kind of level of authority in the process too. So this visual process mapping helps to pull out those as well. It also provides clarity and a shared understanding of the process, that because they are visual, it's something that anyone can understand. It's not in technical language. It can be put on the wall, it can be put in a virtual workspace for everyone to see, but it gives that shared understanding of what the process is end to end, especially if you've got bigger finance teams, because there may be different parts of your team working on what is technically a single process, and it really helps to provide that understanding and impact. If something has changed, how might that affect the team downstream? So that shared understanding is really key. It also helps to pinpoint where those delays are, or where errors or duplication occurs. Because you've called out the roles, you'll be able to pinpoint exactly where these things might be happening based on what the error is that you find or duplication is that you find. They are also more effective. So we can start to think about prioritizing those improvements. We've talked about that bit already. We can think about streamlining the tasks. So one key thing to think about, I think this is taught in Lean, but I've learned it through my ITIL 4 course, is really thinking around, if this step doesn't add value, is it worth doing? Now, that is where we can really start to streamline. And having this visual representation means that it can be a collaborative effort to make any improvements or adjustments going forward. And also it helps aid that implementation of targeted changes. Particularly, you can swap out or delete the steps that don't add any value, the steps that you're improving, you can put that on the board. So this really helps people to visualize how what you're trying to implement will impact their processes, which is a really key tool. So, some core examples of finance processes. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, but these are some really key ones that probably will impact most of you. We have our P2P process, so procure to pay. So this is thinking about your supplier processes. You might not have procurement teams, but you probably are buying something somewhere along the lines. I mean, you have bought this course, so that is something you have purchased. So it's that whole procure to pay piece. Order to cash is the customer side, or very similar to P2P, but customer side, how orders are placed, how customers are set up, how cash is received from those customers. Record to report, or R to R, this is really your month-end process. This is where your month-end process sits. It is impacted by things that have happened in those other processes, but it is really your kind of general ledger tasks will fall into this record to report piece. We then have lead to order. So this precedes the order to cash. Now, some people call this lead to quote or L to Q because we don't want order on both process, like where does order sit? But I like to call it lead to order. Personal preference. I don't think there's a technical correctness there. But lead to order is that piece where you get customer details in. The reason I've called this out as a finance process, when really it's probably a sales process, is because this is usually the first point you get customer details. Now, it's the same as source to procure. Procurement in the larger companies will be a completely separate department to finance, possibly not even headed up by the CFO. So I've called these out because these are the first points where you will start to collect details and master data, and data changing and data amends, and where that happens in your process can start to make things fall down and start to cause delays when we don't have the most accurate and up to date information. If you have a single ERP, this possibly doesn't affect you. But if you have your CRM in a different system or a procurement tool outside of your finance system, then this will potentially cause you some issues. So that is the reason that I have put those into this process list. Within the corporate examples, sorry, that are here, so these are very high level finance process. There will be a multitude of supporting processes. So we have our core process here, and then we can break those core processes down into more detail. So what you probably won't have when you start to think about mapping your processes is a detailed process map for procure to pay. You will probably have a high level one that references sub process, all these supporting processes, and it will be these that are broken down. If you really wanted to, you could create them on one single map, but it might get quite big and feel a bit messy. So supporting examples would be, you might have expense management, fixed asset management, which is sometimes called acquire to retire, inventory management, plan to stock, payroll, tax, treasury, financial planning and analysis, compliance and audit management. So what I really wanted to do here was just to give you a bit of a starting point to start to think about what the processes are in your team. Now, month end is obviously a process. You probably have a month end checklist, but that is not everything that impacts month end, because you will be waiting for your procure to pay cycles to end. You want the accounts payable team to have everything posted on the system. So it's really key we think about the entirety of the finance processes as part of understanding our month end delays. And within that, break it down into those supporting examples. So I'm going to pop a poll up on the screen now. What I would like to know at this point is how confident you guys are in understanding your current month-end close process. So that is this level of detail that we've got here, thinking about this process mapping. How confident are you that you truly understand the processes? So I'm just going to pop that up. And like I say, that is what I expected to see, probably a bit of a lack of confidence. But what I don't want you to think is that you have to suddenly go and now recruit a BA or go and map all these processes in detail and spend 6 months doing really detailed discovery. What I actually recommend is you use a technique called enterprise mapping. And this starts to identify some points that you can fix, some areas of improvement immediately. So what you need to do is have a single workshop. You may need a follow-on if there is anything further to discuss, or maybe someone wasn't available, or maybe you ran out of time, but it's a single workshop, and I'm going to talk you through exactly how to do that with your teams. So 8 steps, high level, for this enterprise mapping system. First one is preparation. Second is the kickoff of the session. The third is looking at your current performance. And I will go through each of these in detail in the following slides. So please don't think you need to know what to do from this one. The fourth one is then segmenting that current performance. The fifth step is we start to understand the levers, so what's driving that performance. We'll start to conduct an initial analysis, and then we will look at sense checking the targets that we might have had for our enterprise, for our month-end improvement. So obviously this cohort and this accelerator is all about closing in 5. But for you, we might sense check and think the first step is not to get to a close in 5, because some of those are longer term goals. Maybe it's a close in 7, maybe it's a close in 5 minutes and not 5 days. So it's really sense checking what we thought our target was during this mapping process too. And then we think about next steps at the end of that workshop. So 8 high-level steps in this enterprise mapping system. So, step 1, preparation. Who should attend? So, what you want to think about is, can we get the fewest number of people with the broadest knowledge across the scope of month end? That is really key. And we will target around 20 people maximum. So, if it's much less, that's absolutely fine. But we don't really want more than 20 people in the session because it can become a bit unruly and doesn't really kind of focus in on what we're trying to do. It's a 2 to 5 hour in-person workshop. Now, I'm a big advocate for in-person. It's just much easier. I know it's kind of old school, I guess, in these days, but a big whiteboard, some post-it notes is much easier to visualize, less draining for everybody involved, especially with a 2 to 5 hour workshop. That is quite a long time to be sat listening on a screen. One of the things that I find actually quite interesting in this preparation stage is it's a bit of a litmus test to see if your company is actually willing to invest in bringing those right people together. Are they actually dedicated to improving your month end? That is really key. By saying you need this workshop, this really kind of sets the tone of what is required, who will be involved, and seeing if your organisation are bought into that. So, what do we include in the invite? So I've got a few points here. Obviously, feel free to flex these. These are just what I recommend doing. And if we run these sessions with teams, this is what we include. So we would include the context. And the context we create is something we call an outcome statement. So, which is essentially a motivational and measurable target. Now, because we are external and we work with our clients, we often try and get these, branded, printed to go on the walls. We get the marketing team to help kind of write it and make sure it's got the right tone of voice. Because you guys are internal to your teams, that might be a bit of overkill, but you want some kind of motivational and measurable target that people in your team will care about. You also want to call out at this point as who's initiated this month-end improvement, so why this has happened, why you think it's required. It's really useful to pull together. Get the objectives of the session, what you're trying to achieve, put in the agenda, how long the session is, any pre-work required. So some useful pre-work that you can get people to start working on. There's something called a SIPOC. If you guys haven't heard of this, I recommend you Google. I can't remember if I've got one in this pack, but a SIPOC stands for Suppliers, Inputs, Processes, Outputs, and Customers. It's an acronym, SIPOC. If you Google it, you're sure to find loads about it. But it's a kind of a high-level way to understand your processes, where you get the data from, where the data goes, who gives you the data and where you send the data. So it's a really nice starting point for some of your processes. So having SIPOCs for your month-end process might be really useful as part of the prep. And having some example inputs and outputs as well. So that might be, let's say you've got a multi-site organization. Maybe your inputs from each of those organizations, maybe they do their own stock count, all those inputs are different. So having an example inputs from each of those organizations will be a useful tool to talk about in the session. And example outputs as well. This is, again, very useful for exactly the same reason. Are those outputs as effective as possible? Or is someone coming back and asking 500 questions because we didn't give them the kind of final answer in the first place? You want to talk about why the attendee has been selected, so why you have chosen them. So going back to this being the fewest people possible that have knowledge across the scope of the month end, you want to maybe detail why particular attendees have been selected or have a broad statement about why they've been selected. This just helps them to kind of realise this isn't just another meeting, isn't just another workshop, this is being thought about and this is very specific. Also give them a bit of a heads up of what type of questions might be asked or explored in the session. So questions that usually come up are things like, how long does the work take? How much does it cost? So if you've got different bits of software throughout the process, how much does that cost? Potentially even how much the team costs doing the work, especially if there's multiple people in multiple roles involved in a single step. And any internal, external influences on their work. So again, if we think about those delays and things like that, that's a key one to bring up. Like who else kind of influences the work? Who else drives some of the quality, some of the efficiency? So give them a bit of a heads up of types of questions you might be asking. Also, key point, make sure there is a copy of the current month end checklist or timetable. Now, I'm sure you guys will have the most up to date, but it's important that everyone knows what you are talking about very specifically and has an opportunity to say, actually, we've already changed this, actually, we've already improved this part. So just make sure you also include that in the invitation. Any questions, sorry, before I move on preparation? Okay, so now we are into the kickoff. So like I said, these are so much better face to face. If you do them virtually, you do need to invest in a bit of tech to make them really interactive, and collaborative. So what you want your room to be is set up like a U shape. That gives us the best use of the space for collaboration. You want a large whiteboard, you want a screen, you want your whiteboard pens, you want some normal pens, get your post-it notes. Now I've put super sticky because the worst thing is if you start sticking these things up and they start falling everywhere before you've had a chance to collate what everybody's done. So the real brand, the post-it notes brand, are the ones that I find the most stickiest. That probably doesn't make sense. The ones that I find the stickiest. So I always recommend get the post-its, get the officials. And you probably want someone to help you facilitate as well. So give them a bit of a briefing, talk them through exactly what you're trying to do. But that person can also help you to capture the notes. They can help to observe the dynamics. If you guys are lucky enough to have any workshop facilitators in your company, change managers, that can really help. Anyone who's kind of got that, us in finance can be a bit technical sometimes. So having someone external to help you observe those dynamics and also give a different viewpoint can be really useful from a couple of points of view. What you don't want though is someone to be asking lots of questions and feeling like they also need to understand the process if they don't, because that is not the objective of the meeting. But as someone to help you capture the notes and observe the dynamics of the room can be really useful. So, what you want to do to kick off is to open the meeting by taking everyone through that agenda. So, we are talking about why we need to improve month end. We're talking about how the workshop will be run. So, I recommend that you give breaks at least every hour. For about 5 minutes. Now, that allows people to check their emails, do a little bit of work, as well as obviously make a drink or have a comfort break. But making it really clear that we are here to focus in the time we're focusing, but you will have regular breaks, can actually help to keep people more focused and more interactive. I do know someone who's facilitated one of these sessions did actually give a 5 minute break every half an hour. And that seemed to work well for them. So definitely trial it. I'm sure you'll be doing other workshops along this month end improvement process. So definitely try what works for your team, but I do recommend 5 minutes at least every hour. Also, talk to them about the outcome that you're looking for. So, if you do have specific targets, so if it genuinely is, we want to be closing in 5 days, make sure those are known. It's not something you need to hide. It's something that can actually create more innovation and create better ideas because they know exactly what it is that you're looking for. And then you can talk to them a little bit at this point about next steps, which does include things like targeted analysis. So you'll come up with loads of ideas during these sessions, but you might need to understand them a bit more. You might need to do some surveys. You might need to do maybe a time and motion study to understand if it really does take as long as they're saying in the session. So things that will happen next include that targeted analysis piece. So that is your kickoff. Any questions from the Great. So the next step is looking at the current performance. So I want you to get your whiteboard in the session, and I want you to draw a straight line, as straight as you can, horizontal. And this line represents the number of working days it takes you to close your month end. So put a 0 on the left side and put the total number of working days on the right side. And I've got 15 here just in my example. So that is the number of working days your month end takes. Straight line, 0 at one end, number of days at the other. That is your current performance. It's as simple as that. One of those high level steps is as simple as drawing a straight line. I assume there's no questions. I'll come back to them if there are. But let me talk first about the segmentation. So we are saying that this takes 15 days, but what is taking 15 days? What we want to do is understand the types of activity that are taking place and then how many days are spent on that type of activity. Now, what this isn't is it is not a timeline. And this is an open discussion to come up with what makes most sense for your team in how to segment the types of activity that are taking place. So, this is not about replicating your month end timetable. This is not about having every step on this line. It's not a timeline, doesn't have to be chronological. It's types of activity. People can get a bit hung up on this and spend a lot of time. So make sure your team know this just needs to be roughly right. We don't need to go in and start analysing during the session if our data extraction does take 4 days, or now we're confused at why it's saying 4 days because that seems way too long. It's roughly right. What we do need to have, though, is these numbers adding up to your working day number. So the number of days for each type of activity should equal the total number of working days. And already from your segmentation, so this is literally after the kickoff, we've drawn a line, segmented. We're not even that far into this workshop. We can already see where we might need to spend some of our time and attention looking into in more detail. We've got a lot of time in reviewing corrections. We've got a lot of time in data extraction. And we have, a fairly big amount of time in meetings. So there's 3 areas there already that we can focus in on. Where we might have focused in on if we hadn't have done this segmentation piece is we might have said, we need a simpler way to create a board pack. Let's have a Power BI tool or any kind of BI tool and create a board pack that's self-serve. And then we would get to the end of spending all that money implementing a system to realize we probably save absolutely no time. So this really starts to already focus you in on which areas may need attention. Any questions on that current performance piece or the segmentation piece before I start to talk about those levers? So levers might feel more natural to call them drivers. I call them levers just because I always have. But it's kind of things that influence the current performance. So things that drive the current performance, those levers. So my preference is to let the team decide the types of lever that might be worth including. But if you are really stuck, some levers that tend to come up typically are systems. So what systems are involved in each step, the geography. So if you are a bigger organization, or if you guys are kind of spread around the country, around the world, around the office even, where are people based, the teams that are involved, the stakeholders, any regulations that might kind of determine and drive some of that performance. And then any governance and controls in there as well, where we can start to talk about things like that decision making, that authority piece. For the example, I have just done very high level a systems and a teams lever. so you can see. Now, when I do this, I tend to stick with the whiteboard at this point and write these levers on the whiteboard. So I've done systems, and I will start to look at all the different systems. I can't really read that, but I think I've put 5 PMS systems. That's like a practice management system. Are used in data extraction, but they're also used in review and corrections. We've got a bank using that data extraction piece, but we've got 11 different banks there. You can see Excel is included in every step apart from the board pack, Sage a couple of times. And I've also done teams. So we've got a cash and banking team used in the first 3 activity clusters, purchase ledger, management accounts. So it really just starts to make you visualize where these levers are involved, and if there's multiple involved in one activity type, or even where they're kind of repeated and used again, even though we've already kind of accessed them or used them. So it can start to make you think about uh, why can't we do this kind of review piece potentially with those 5 PMSs as part of data extraction? Why are we using Excel? That is quite a manual tool. Can we remove it entirely? Why are cash and banking, management accounts, and the FBPs all involved in the review and corrections piece? So it can start to kind of get you thinking already just by visualizing this. You may need quite a big whiteboard to get some of these levers on. I have been somewhere we have genuinely run out of space because they have so many systems. But it's really useful because this is where we can start to see where those bottlenecks are, where the things are that can be improved. Any questions on the Okay, this is the final big step as an open discussion. So, this is your initial analysis. So, we have created our map. So, in our levers section, we created our map. Now we are starting to analyze it. So, there are 2 types of analysis, 2 categories that I want you to think about. One is knowledge gap. So this is calling out using post-it notes, and this is for the whole team to do. So everyone should have their own post-it notes and pen. This is to call out any areas maybe that aren't represented in the workshop. So maybe we've said, oh, purchase ledger involved in a couple of steps here, but they're not in the room, so no one can really comment on what exactly they're doing. So that would be a knowledge gap in the session, or potentially where any responses have been slightly uncertain. So maybe it's, I think we've got 5 PMSs. So that would be a knowledge gap. So try and use 2 different color post-its if you can, because it's much easier to visualize. So maybe you've got pink post-its for your knowledge gaps. And on those post-its, just get the team to write what that knowledge gap is. So it might be no one from purchase ledger here. It might be how many PMSs do we have? We then have opportunities. So this is the exciting bit for me. This is really the initial view of which segments, so your segments at the top, and which levers, so all the detail at the bottom, which have the best potential for improvement. Now, again, get your team to really think about what the solution could be, and don't call them out if they don't come up with a solution. If they're just identifying the problem, maybe too slow, maybe this team takes too long, that is absolutely fine, because once we've highlighted everything, we've got all the post-it notes up on the wall. We are going to move into that kind of targeted analysis piece as a next step. So there's always time to come back and revisit and come up with a solution. But this is about where are we now? This is about the performance now. So don't try and think too much about how do we fix it. This is really kind of calling out what are potential areas of improvement, and where those knowledge gaps might be. Once everything is on the wall, though, before you kind of call it quits, just make sure you play things back to the group, because there's probably people who have put up very similar opportunities or very similar knowledge gaps. So just start to consolidate and start to make sure there's broad agreement, because someone might have written something up and someone will disagree. This isn't a knowledge gap I can explain. I'm actually from purchase ledger, or I did work in purchase ledger last week before I moved into my new role. So just make sure there's an opportunity to play everything back before you move on. And then, like I say, anything that's up there will need to be part of a targeted analysis outside of this workshop. So that isn't part of this step. Once you've got everything up on the wall, we are really sense checking those targets. So do this as a group discussion, actually. So this is still a group discussion. Start to think about, if we did put in all of these improvements that we've suggested and that we think we can really target and make a difference, what might our new working day numbers look like? And I would write those along the top, but try and get agreement. Again, it's roughly right. You're not holding anyone to this. But what it does give you a bit of an indication of is a very strong starting point. One, because you've collaborated with the team and got the buy-in. We've all said this will now take one day. We've all said this will now take half a day. So actually, we can get it down to 7.5 days, and we all think that is possible. It's a really good way to get people on board with what you're trying to do. And just make sure that you can save this then as a digital version. So that might actually just be a photo, but if you can translate it into something like a Miro board or a Visio, a Lucidchart, something, even just Microsoft Whiteboard, just something that people can start to play around with and remind themselves of as they go through the process as well. Yep, that's a really great question, actually. We should really make sure that we are including work done before and after. I know some people do their balance sheet recs within their month end, some do it or within their month end close, some do it after the month end close for the prior month. Just make sure things like balance sheet recs are included in that number of working days. Absolutely, yeah. Right. And then we come on to our next steps. So before you tell everyone to go, that just falls into cyberspace, never to be talked about again. Make sure we set the scene for what's coming next. So we've done some really great analysis. This is a really great starting point, but that is all it is. It is a starting point. It is the current performance with an idea of where we can get the best efficiency or effectiveness gains. So make sure we start to talk about here what is the next step, and that really is that targeted analysis piece. Like I said earlier, this can include things like surveys, it might be one-on-one interviews, or you might want to start mapping processes in detail just to understand what's happening. So the idea is, so I'm just going to go back because I think it's more helpful. The idea is that we are filling those knowledge gaps in this targeted analysis, and we are doing a deep dive of those potential areas of opportunity. So anything that you've put up here, we're starting to analyse in more detail in separate sessions. And you guys decide that. You might think, well, I know that myself, I don't need to do that. You might think, actually, I would like everyone's opinion on this, so going to send out a survey. Or you might think, practice management system, it's an operational piece. I'm going to go and interview the operations team, or even potentially one of the site managers who uses the system maybe more than the finance team do. Maybe you want to go and interview them and understand how they're using it, etc. So targeted analysis is the next step, but that can take many forms depending on what you uncover. If you get really stuck, I have tried to include some bonus questions here. Not really to be not really to be said out loud during the session, but it's really to think about while you're conducting this session, because you guys possibly will be the first time you're doing this. And sometimes things can get a bit quiet, people can get a bit confused at what we're trying to do. So these questions are just there to help point you in the right direction. But like I say, not really to be said out loud, they're kind of for internal reflection during the session. So they are, is there anything that can't be changed or is off limits? So if people are putting up opportunities, but you absolutely know we can't change that, then we can rule that out very quickly. Um, are you getting the full picture or is more analysis needed? So again, you can call out some things that maybe need more targeted analysis, or maybe you need to enhance your enterprise map with a different lever, but that maybe requires a different set of people. So are you getting the full picture? Are you getting a line of sight to reduced month-end days? So is the improvement feasibility at risk? So we can see here, if I just go back, we have got 15 days currently, and we can get it halved to 7.5 days. Well, that doesn't get us to our target of 5 days. Like, is it enough? Can we go for it? Is it still worth the investment? So, just understanding if we've got line of sight to how we're going to achieve that reduction, and is it good enough? And then wait times. So I go on about wait times a lot, so I do apologise, but they are a waste of time. So are there wait times between segments that should be considered? So another key thing to think about. So going back again, do we have a situation where we're waiting for the site managers to send us reports from the PMSs, or can we access them directly? Do we have a situation where the purchase ledger team have to wait for cash and banking to do some data entry before they can do their piece, or the other way around? Is there anything where there is waiting times? Because that is an opportunity for improvement. So some internal reflection questions to ask yourself during the session. Now, we're going on to our second segment, but before I do, I'd just like to wait and see if anyone has any questions, and we can take a short comfort break afterwards. So first off, any questions? Okay, thank you guys for coming back promptly. So just a reminder, this first session is all about mapping the current process. So let's talk about unmasking those culprits. So this should help you to identify those specific activities and behaviors, which we can call time thieves, and any stress triggers actually that hinder that efficiency and well-being during the month-end close. There was a study done by Oxford University where they determined that happy people are 13% more productive. So I do talk a bit about how we can make the team happier to basically enhance that productivity. So any time thieves and any stress triggers is what we're trying to unmask here. So why is it important to consider the people inefficiencies and those stressors rather than just those process steps? So like I said, this is based on actual research and actual evidence. But it hopefully is common sense, and it hopefully is all things that we know, but I just do really want to call out because it's often overlooked and we very much focus on those process steps. So obviously things like stress, burnout, people going off ill, low morale, it can absolutely undermine the best process in the world. So we can have our month-end process down to a T, we've got it 1 day close, but if there is low morale, if the teams are burnt out, not in, it's just not going to function. Any unnecessary stress or even actually unclear expectations definitely causes productivity to suffer. We are talking about things like increase of errors. Now, a lot of teams that I work with do spend a lot of time correcting errors, and stress and the human factor will absolutely increase that, because naturally, if you're stressed, you just start to lose focus. You start to get distracted. So it's vital that we are looking at stress as one of the key factors in making month end efficient. And then creating a supportive environment on the flip side. Imagine you have a supportive environment, you've got everyone engaged, morale's really high. Like, obviously, the team will be more resilient. They'll feel more of a team. They'll be wanting to help each other out. Maybe the purchase ledger team are behind this month, and maybe the cash and banking team are well ahead. If you've got a great supportive environment, there will be undoubtedly no issues, and it will probably be volunteered, that the teams will help each other to catch up rather than it being kind of siloed and toxic. So let's talk about those culprits, those time thieves, and those stress triggers. So time thieves, I've just put a bit of a definition in here on what each of these are to me. This might be a personal thing where you think of these slightly differently, but for me, time thieves are those tasks or distractions that quietly erode productivity. So things like unnecessary meetings. My goodness, isn't this a thing right now? Frequent interruptions. I mean, it is a good debate for working from home to not be interrupted. Unclear instructions, repetitive manual tasks, or actually waiting. Again, waiting is a massive time thief for me. And then we have our stress triggers. So these are events, tasks, or interactions that consistently raise stress levels, which obviously negatively impacts the employee's well-being. So what we want to do is be really proactive in not just mitigating these, but actually identifying. Again, in a kind of continuous improvement style, we should always be looking at these, but identifying and mitigating both time thieves and the stress triggers. And I believe that you guys, if you do keep on top of this, can absolutely improve both the effectiveness and efficiency of your month end process just by looking at this on its own. So, thinking about your teams and their well being to create that much more sustainable work environment for everybody. Any questions before I move on? Fabulous. So, I am going to put you into some breakout rooms now. It's chosen at random, and they might change throughout the sessions that we go through over the next few weeks. I'm only going to do 2 this time, so I'm going to break you in half, and it will just be 5 minutes. So, what I would like you to do is start to think about your time thieves. So, I'm just going to pop this back on the screen. Feel free to take a photo to remind you of exactly what we're talking about. But think about time thieves, start to identify them, and think about some stress triggers and start to identify those too. Come back with your top 2. So, top 2 time thieves from the group and top 2 stress triggers from the group. And then I want you guys to think about what strategies could be put in place to mitigate these. So, room 1, I'm actually going to get you to just do the time thieves. So, those are, as a reminder, the tasks or distractions that quietly erode productivity. So, room 1, you are doing time thieves, top 2 time thieves, and what strategies could be explored to mitigate them. Room 2, I'm going to get you on stress triggers only. So, stress triggers are events, tasks, or interactions that consistently raise stress levels. And you guys are going to come back with your top 2 stress triggers, and what strategies could be explored to mitigate them. So, without further ado, let's jump into our break room. Great, great discussion. So hopefully you guys really found that useful, maybe gave you some food for thought, some strategies that we could put in place immediately. Before we do move into peer sharing, I'm going to take another quick comfort break. So please come back in a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, just a quick one this time, guys, and I'll see you in a bit. Right, guys, we're going to have a big old group discussion now because this is our peer sharing segment. If you guys don't want to speak out loud, please do use the chat functionality. That's absolutely fine. But what I would like us to discuss is your most challenging or surprising experiences during your month-end close process. So over to you guys. I will start picking on you if you don't talk, but please call out your kind of common pain points. Again, I hope you genuinely found that discussion useful. I saw a few of you nodding, some of you were talking, so that's nice to see. But what I kind of really want to call out is why it's so valuable when we share those experiences. So I want you guys to really see yourselves as a team as we work through this journey, even when I'm finished and you guys are off on your own, you guys can stay as a team looking to kind of improve your month ends, transform your teams in more and more positive ways. So, being able to share like this, we can connect and we can start to navigate some of those complexities and drive that sustainable growth together. Maybe we come up with a slightly more innovative way rather than just thinking on our own in a silo. So having that mutual understanding, that empathy, that collective problem solving uh, is absolutely a massive benefit of this peer sharing activity. It also starts to accelerate skill development. So maybe some of you have specialised in certain areas of finance. Maybe some of you are new to a management role. Maybe some of you are completely new to finance. Actually, it will start to accelerate the development of skills you need within your role, but also within this process to improve your month end. And keep doing this. Peer sharing means we will start to build trust and start to build that culture of continuous improvement. And hopefully, again, because of the nodding and agreement, know that you are not alone in this difficulties that you are facing. So that does help when you feel like you're not alone. It does help to boost the morale. You're not in this pit of despair that you're never going to get out of. Someone else is also going through the same experience. So it should give you a bit of confidence as well that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So let's continue our sharing experience. I would like you to let me know, we'll go around the room. What is the most unexpected thing that has happened during your month end close? So I'll give you some time to think about this. But what I would like you to share is the situation you're in, the immediate reactions, and the lessons learned from that experience. And there we go, guys. We are almost at the end of our session. So make sure you download, if you haven't already, the workbook, the accompanying workbook for this lesson. Now, do as much as you can before the next one. But if you do not and you do not have time for this week, excuse me, then that's absolutely fine. We can catch up. Those workbooks are there forever for you. But just make sure you download and start to understand some of the work that needs to take place. And it's not just on you, get your teams to help you as well. Please join the WhatsApp group. That is the group with all of us, with all your peers on this call as well. If any of you have the one-on-one sessions booked, then the booking link will be coming out to you as well. And any questions? I think I just asked that, so I think we've probably covered. But any more questions before I end the session? Fab. So next week we are doing cut the crap. So make sure you are here. We're doing same day every week just to make it really clear, same time. So I will see you all next week. Thanks, guys. I've been Tessa Hebditch of Chickpea, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye for now.